Hello and welcome again to my channel English Literature for Competitive Exams. Today we will talk about Robert Frost, a 20th century American poet and playwright. Please watch the video till the end. This video will be also available in Hindi for our Hindi viewers. The link you can find in our description box. So let's get started. Robert Frost's full name is Robert Lee Frost. He was a 20th century American poet and playwright. He was born on March 26, 1874 in San Francisco, California. He died on January 29, 1963 at the age of 88 in Boston, but is buried in Vermont. His father, William Prescott Frost Jr., was a teacher and later an editor of the San Francisco Evening Bulletin. He was a descendant of Devonshire Frost. His mother, Isabel Moody, she was of Scottish ancestry. William Prescott Frost named his son Robert Frost after Confederate Army Southern General Robert E. Lee. In May 1885, William Prescott Frost Jr. died of tuberculosis when Frost was just 11. After William Prescott Frost's death, Robert Frost's family moved to Lawrence, Massachusetts, where he spent most of his teenage years. Frost's mother, Isabel Moody, died of cancer in 1900 when Frost was 26. After leaving school, Frost worked as a teacher, cobbler, and editor of the Lawrence Sentinel. Robert Frost married Eleanor Miriam White. Eleanor Miriam White, who had a history of heart problems, developed breast cancer in 1937 and died of heart failure on March 20, 1938. In 1894, after the publication of his first poem, My Butterfly, an elegy, Robert Frost proposed to Eleanor White, who declined his marriage proposal because she wanted to finish her college first. Frost went to Virginia's Great Dismal Swamp after thinking he had lost her. He even contemplated suicide. After he returned from his trip, he asked Eleanor again. This time she agreed because she had graduated. They married on December 19, 1895. Robert Frost began his affair with a married woman, Kathleen Morrison, only after 6 months of his wife's death in 1938. Kathleen Morrison served as his secretary until his death in 1963. Frost and Eleanor had 6 children, but only 2 of them survived their father. Son Elliot Frost, 1896 to 1900, daughter Leslie Frost Ballantyne, 1899 to 1983, son Carol Frost, 1902 to 1940, daughter Irma Frost, 1903 to 1967, daughter Marjorie Frost, 1905 to 1934, daughter Eleanor Bettina Frost, 1907. Son Elliot Frost died of cholera in 1900 at the age of 4. Daughter Marjorie died as a result of puerperal fever after childbirth. Son Carol killed himself with a shotgun. Daughter Eleanor Bettina Frost died just days after birth in 1907. Robert Frost's personal life. Robert Frost experienced a lot of loss and grief in his personal life. Frost's family apparently had a history of mental illness, as both he and his mother suffered from depression. In 1920, Frost admitted his younger sister Jeannie to a mental hospital where she died 9 years later. In 1947, his daughter Irma was admitted to a mental hospital. Frost's wife, Eleanor Frost, also suffered from depression as well. Robert Frost's education. In 1892, Frost graduated from Lawrence High School and shared the valedictorian award with Eleanor White, the woman he loved. Frost was a dropout from college twice. First, he stayed at Dartmouth in 1892 only for 2 months, later explaining that I wasn't suited for that place. Frost became a member of Greek life at Dartmouth College by joining the Theta Delta Chi fraternity. Despite the fact that Frost did not complete his studies at Dartmouth, he is the only recipient of 2 honorary degrees from Dartmouth. Frost returned home to teach and work at various jobs, including delivering newspapers and maintaining carbon arc lamps in a factory. From 1897 to 1899, he was at Harvard University but quit after 2 years without receiving a degree due to his poor health and his wife being pregnant. He said, "They could not make a student of me here, but they gave it their best." Nonetheless, Harvard bestowed honorary degree on him in 1937. 1894, Robert Frost's first poem. In 1894, at the age of 20, he sold his first poem, My Butterfly, an elegy, to the New York Independent for $15. Robert Frost as a farmer. Frost and his wife were given a farm by Frost's grandfather in Derry, New Hampshire. To support himself while writing poetry, Frost worked as a farmer. Frost worked in farm for 9 years, from 1900 to 1909, but failed at farming. Robert Frost taught as an English teacher. Then from 1906 to 1911, he taught English at New Hampshire's Pinkerton Academy and later at New Hampshire Normal School in Plymouth, New Hampshire. Throughout this period, Frost struggled to get his poems published. In their rejection letters, the Atlantic Monthly described Frost's poetry as vigorous verse. Robert Frost with family moved to England. In 1912, after experiencing limited success and publishers' resistance, Frost and his family moved to England. First settled in Beaconsfield near London, believing that British publishers would be more receptive to the works of a new poet. It was a risk that paid off when his first poetry collection published in England in 1913. 1913 and 1914, first and second collection of poetry. In 1913, Frost's first collection of poems, A Boy's Will, was published by British publisher David Nutt. In 1914, Nutt published Frost's second poetry collection, North of Boston. His work was first published in England before being released in the United States. 1913, A Boy's Will. Robert Frost achieved his first degree of success in England. After being turned down by American publishers for 20 years, Frost ultimately published his first collection, A Boy's Will, in London in 1913. Henry Holt published the edition of A Boy's Will in America in 1915. This drew the attention of Ezra Pound, who became the first American to write a favorable review of Frost's work. Ezra Pound's review, 1913, A Boy's Will. In an influential review about Frost's A Boy's Will in the journal Poetry, Ezra Pound wrote that his poetry has the tang of the New Hampshire woods and it has just this utter sincerity. It is not post-Miltonic or post-Swinburnian or post-Kiplonian. This man has the good sense to speak naturally and to paint the thing as he sees it. 1913, A Boy's Will. A Boy's Will was dedicated to his wife Eleanor Miriam White. About A Boy's Will, Robert Frost wrote that the poems were pretty near being the story of 5 years of his life. Into My Own is the first poem of the book A Boy's Will. A Boy's Will was deemed by W.B. Yeats to be the best poetry produced in America in a very long time. 1914, North of Boston. North of Boston was called a sad book by Amy Lowell because of its portraits of inbred, isolated, and psychologically troubled rural New Englanders. North of Boston is a collection of 17 poems. North of Boston is considered as the harshest book of Robert Frost. Robert Frost called North of Boston a book of people because most of the poems deal with New England themes and Yankee farmers. Frost's reputation as a talented poet was established by the publication of North Boston in both America and England. Mending Wall is the first poem of North of Boston. 1915, returned to America. In 1915, with the outbreak of World War I, Robert Frost returned to America and settled in New Hampshire. From 1916 to 1918, he taught English at Amherst College in Massachusetts and pursued his writing career. From 1916 to 1938, he lectured and taught part-time at Amherst College and the University of Michigan. Member of the National Institute of Arts and Letters. In 1916, he became a member of the National Institute of Arts and Letters, a 250-member honor society. In 1920, he bought a 150-acre property and contributed to the founding of Middlebury College Bread Loaf School of English. For 42 years, from 1921 to 1963, he spent every summer working as an English teacher at Middlebury College Bread Loaf School of English, located in Ripon, Vermont. Taught at Amherst College. He also taught frequently at Amherst College. He bought a farm in South Miami, Florida in 1940 and gave it the name Pencil Pines. Depiction of New England rural life. He was admired for his depictions of New England rural life, command of American colloquial speech, and realistic verse depicting ordinary people in everyday situations. The central themes of his poems are men, women, humanity, loneliness, isolation, and nature. Received 4 Pulitzer Prizes. Frost is the only poet to have received 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry during his lifetime in 1924, 1931, 1937, and 1943. Nobody had ever won so many before him. Robert Frost won his first Pulitzer Prize for New Hampshire in 1924, collected poems in 1931, A Further Range in 1937, which was divided into 6 parts and dedicated to his wife, A Witness Tree in 1943. K. Morrison was the inspiration for A Witness Tree. Poet in Residence. Robert Frost was a poet in residence at Harvard 1939 to 1943, Dartmouth 1943 to 1949, Amherst College 1949 to 1963. 1958 to 1959, he was the consultant in poetry to the Library of Congress. The post was later styled Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry. Received United States Congressional Gold Medal. In 1960, John F. Kennedy awarded Frost Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian award, United States, in recognition of his poetry, which enabled the culture of the United States and the philosophy of the world. On July 22, 1961, the Vermont State League of Women's Clubs elected him as Vermont's Poet Laureate. He became one of America's rare public literary figures, almost an artistic institution. The first poet to read a poem at John F. Kennedy's inauguration. Frost was the first of only 5 poets to recite a poem at a United States presidential inauguration. On January 20, 1961, at the age of 86, Frost became the first poet to read a poem at John F. Kennedy's inauguration. Despite having prepared a poem called Dedication for the occasion, he struggled to read the lightly typed words in the glare of the sun. He ended up reciting the gift outright instead. Frost's performance paved the way for Maya Angelou, Miller Williams, Elizabeth Alexander, and Richard Blanco in the following years. Made friends in England. In England, he made important friends such as T.E. Hume and Ezra Pound, Edward Thomas, a member of the Denmark Poets, and Frost's inspiration for The Road Not Taken. 1916, The Road Not Taken. Frost became close friends with the poet Edward Thomas while in England. Robert Frost wrote the poem The Road Not Taken as a joke about his friend Edward Thomas. The Road Not Taken, published in 1916, is partly a sarcastic comment on Edward Thomas' difficulty making decisions about the course of his life. President John F. Kennedy on Robert Frost. President John F. Kennedy said, "The death of Robert Frost leaves a vacancy in the American spirit. He was the great American poet of our time." President John F. Kennedy said, "He has bequeathed his nation a body of imperishable verse from which Americans will forever gain joy and understanding." Did you know? 31 times Robert Frost was nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature. Randall Jarrell defended Frost against charges of being too traditional and out of touch. Frost's Nothing Gold Can Stay is included in S. A. Hinton's novel The Outsiders. The title of Frost's poem Out Out comes from Shakespeare's Macbeth 1623. In his later years, Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, kept a book of Robert Frost close to him, even keeping it on his bedside table as he lay dying. The last four lines of the poem, "Stopping by woods on a snowy evening," were underlined on one page of the book. On October 3, 2000, at the funeral of former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, the eldest son Justin rephrased the last stanza of Frost's poem in his eulogy. "The woods are lovely, dark and deep. He kept his promises and earned his sleep." Frost traveled to the Soviet Union in the summer of 1962 with Interior Secretary Stuart Udall with the aim of meeting Nikita Khrushchev and advocating for amicable relations between the two Cold War superpowers. Alvarez says that Frost is not a nature poet. Robert Frost said, "I guess I am not a nature poet. I have written only 2 poems without a human being in them." Frost said of himself, "I am not a regionalist, I am a realist. I wrote about realms of democracy and realms of the spirit." Robert Frost said, "I might be called a synecdochist, for I prefer synecdoche in poetry. Synecdoche is figure of speech." Robert Frost called his colloquial approach to language the sound of sense. On nature, Frost said, "Half the world is composed of people who have something to say and can't, and the other half who have nothing to say and keep on saying it." Frost is considered a pastoral poet and a poet of nature. Ezra Pound became the first American to write a favorable review of Robert Frost's work. Frost later resented Pound's attempt to manipulate his American prosody. Ezra Pound introduced Robert Frost to William Butler Yeats. Build Soil is Robert Frost's long philosophical poem. Robert Frost's poem Fire and Ice consists only of 9 lines. The poem Into My Own expresses how Robert Frost turned away from people. The poem Tuft of Flowers shows how Robert Frost came back to people. He was awarded 40 honorary degrees in addition to numerous other accolades from Oxford, Cambridge, Bates, Amherst, Harvard, and Dartmouth, where he received 2 degrees. Many universities, including Amherst College in Virginia and Robert Frost Middle School in Fairfax, named their libraries after Robert Frost. On his 75th birthday, the United States Senate passed a resolution honoring him, saying his poems have helped to guide American thought, humor, and wisdom, setting forth to our minds a reliable representation of ourselves and of all men. Robert Graves called Robert Frost the voice of America. Lionel Trilling called Robert Frost a terrifying poet. Robert Lee Frost has been called America's purest classical lyricist and one of the outstanding poets of the 20th century. His poems are reviewed in the Anthology of Modern American Poetry. Robert Frost was influenced by Robert Graves, Rupert Brooke, Thomas Hardy, William Butler Yeats, John Keats, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Robert Frost influenced Robert Francis, Seamus Heaney, Richard Wilbur, Edward Thomas, James Wright. Robert Frost's experiences: reporter 1895, poultry farmer 1900 to 1909, English teacher Pinkerton Academy 1906 to 1911, English teacher New Hampshire Normal School 1911 to 1912, instructor Amherst College 1917 to 1920, 1923 to 1925, 1926 to 1938, and 1949. Instructor, University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, 1921 to 1922, and 1925. Lecturer, Breadloaf School of English at Middlebury College, 1921 to 1963. Associate Fellow, Yale University, 1933. Ralph Waldo Emerson Fellow in Poetry, Harvard University, 1939 to 1943. George Tickner Fellow in the Humanities, Dartmouth College, 1943 to 1949. 1963, Robert Frost's death. In 1962, Robert Frost was diagnosed with prostate and bladder cancer. On December 23, he suffered a pulmonary embolism. He underwent extensive surgery the same year. In 1963, he died as a result of complications from that surgery. Robert Frost's Honors and Awards. Honorary degree, Yale University, 1924. Russell Lyons Poetry Prize, 1931. Honorary degree, Dartmouth College, 1933. Honorary degree, Harvard University, 1937. Gold Medal for Poetry, National Institute of Arts and Letters, 1939. Gold Medal, Poetry Society of America, 1941. Honorary degree, Princeton University, 1941. First Annual Poetry Award, Boston Arts Festival, 1954. Medal for Distinguished Service, Theodore Roosevelt Society, 1954. Honorary degree, Oxford University, 1957. Honorary degree, Cambridge University, 1957. Gold Medal for Distinguished Service, Poetry Society of America, 1958. Emerson Traub Medal, American Academy of Arts and Sciences, 1958. Medal for Achievements in the Arts, Signet Society, Harvard College, 1958. Congressional Gold Medal, 1960. Poet Laureate of Vermont, 1961. Edward McDowell Medal, 1962. Bollingen Prize in Poetry, 1963. Famous poetry collections. 1913, A Boy's Will. 1914, North of Boston consists of poems like After Apple Picking, The Death of the Hired Man, Mending Wall. 1916, Mountain Interval consists of poems like Birches, Out, Out, The Oven Bird, The Road Not Taken. 1923, selected poems, The Runaway, also includes poems from first 3 volumes. 1923, New Hampshire consists of poems like Fire and Ice, Nothing Gold Can Stay, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. 1924, several short poems. 1928, selected poems. 1928, West Running Brook consists of poems like Acquainted with the Night. 1929, The Lovely Shall Be Choosers. 1930, collected poems of Robert Frost. 1933, The Lone Striker. Selected poems, 3rd edition, 1934. 3 poems, 1935. The Goal Hesperide, 1935. From Snow to Snow, 1936. A Further Range, 1936. Collected poems of Robert Frost, 1939. 1942, A Witness Tree consists of poems like The Gift Outright, A Question, The Silken Tent. 1943, Come In and Other Poems. 1947, Steeple Bush. Complete poems of Robert Frost, 1949. Hard Not to Be King, 1951. Aforesaid, 1954. A Remembrance Collection of New Poems, 1959. You Come To, 1959. In the Clearing, 1962. The Poetry of Robert Frost, 1969. Some famous plays by Robert Frost. 1929, A Way Out, a one-act play. 1929, The Cows in the Corn, a one-act Irish play in rhyme. 1945, A Mask of Reason. 1947, A Mask of Mercy. With that, we have come to an end of the video. If you have liked the video, please like and share and subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for our more upcoming videos. All the best for your exams and thank you for watching.